I'm Courtney Fish. I'm the training manager here at the Thompson Center, and my colleague Jacqueline Benigno is our program coordinator for our STRIVE program. She'll be talking more about that here in just a little bit. So today we're going to talk about what autism is, what that means when you hear the word autism or autism spectrum disorder. We'll talk about how you can support students that you might interact with who have autism, but also you maybe have some colleagues that you work with who have autism, and you may or may not be aware of that. And then we'll go over our STRIVE program, which is our post-secondary program for individuals who have autism that are on the MU campus. So first, let's talk about what autism is and maybe also what it's not, what myths that you might have heard. So autism is what we call a spectrum disorder, and it's a neurodevelopmental disorder that occurs at birth or early on in utero. So it's a developmental disorder, and it really can affect a variety affect an individual in a variety of ways. So everything from emotional regulation to the development of their brain and their central nervous system, their ability to control and regulate their emotions, can affect motor coordination. And so when I'm explaining what autism is to kids, I like to say it just means that an individual's brain thinks and works a little differently maybe than what we call neurotypical individuals. Autism is a lifelong disorder, and we know that it affects boys about 4 times more than females. And we're looking at the causes of that, whether, the genetic component of that or the environmental component. How autism presents in boys and girls looks a little different. So boys, you might see more hyperactivity, you might see more aggression, poor impulse control. And so if I'm really little and I'm exhibiting those signs, that's more likely to get pinged on a teacher or a parent's radar, and then I'm going to get an evaluation. Versus girls who have autism, they maybe are more withdrawn, quiet, especially if I have at or above average IQ in school and I'm doing well and I'm submitting assignments on time and I don't have any problem behavior. I might not get recognized as having autism as much as the male counterpart. So when we think about autism, there's 2 primary domains that we see an impact of autism, and this is how we actually go about diagnosing autism. So we look at the presence of restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. So we're looking for behaviors that are there that we wouldn't see in typically developing people. And then we're looking for social communication behaviors that should be there that we're not seeing, and behaviors that we would see in typically developing people. And so let's break down these 2 domains a little more closely. So that first one, those restricted or repetitive behaviors or interests. Some of our individuals with autism have really rigidly held routines, and this goes beyond just a preference to routine. You and I, we probably have a schedule that we do every day. Maybe when you go to work, you drive the same route to work every day. And if there was construction or traffic and you had to take a detour, that would be annoying, right? But you would be able to problem solve and cope. And our individuals with autism, even something as simple as that, could really throw them off. It could cause them to maybe engage in problem behavior, cause them to be really anxious, and it could ruin their whole day or ruin their ability to, problem solve and go about the next task that they had in their day. Some of the individuals we work with also have a high level of fixation. So they have that restricted interest that they really like, and that can be a really great strength. I don't know if you guys have seen the show The Good Doctor, but that's his area, right? Or Sheldon on Big Bang, he loves science. And so you can really use that fixation as a strength, especially when it comes to employment or activities, but also, thinking about sometimes that can be too fixated and it can really impact or interfere with an individual's ability to interact in their world. Again, limited scopes of interest. So really the things that they're interested in are really narrow, or maybe they're a little different or odd than what we typically see people being interested in. I've worked with lots of individuals where they have unusual favorite objects. I worked with one young adult who loved vacuums. I worked with another kid who loved Diet Dr. Pepper 2-liter bottle caps and only Diet Dr. Pepper 2-liter bottle caps. The fact that he could distinguish those is really neat, but again, that was impacting his ability to learn and be around his peers. And so, these things can definitely be used as a strength, but also being aware that they can have a pretty big impact on someone's life. Getting into the ritualized patterns of behavior. So we talked kind of about the insistent on sameness and routine and those fixated interests. And some of our individuals also engage in what we call ritualistic behavior. So these are going to be things that a lot of times people associate with autism. So this is going to be like hand flapping or spinning in circles. Sometimes individuals will do what we call scripting, where they're just kind of repeating something that they've heard either on a TV show or someone that they know has said, and they repeat it over and over. Sometimes they engage what we call echolalia. So if I were to say, what's your name? They would say, what's your name? Back to me. Or if I were to say, do you like blue or red? They would say red. They're always repeating the last thing. And so that can be kind of tricky too when we look at communication, which we'll talk more about here in a second. So when we think about those social communication differences, we notice it a lot, especially in older individuals that you might be interacting with here on campus in terms of conversation skills, their ability to engage in what we call reciprocal conversations. So a lot of times individuals will be great at answering questions. So if I say, hey, how was your weekend? They can tell me all about their weekend, but they miss that second piece of that conversation, which is then asking me how my weekend was back. Also just taking the initiative to reach out and respond to others, especially, being in the student center or being in a large classroom. It can take a lot of skill to go up to someone and initiate a conversation and get that going. And sometimes that's really anxiety provoking for a lot of our individuals. Also, using nonverbal communication can be really challenging. So things like making eye contact. Jacqueline and I have worked with students where you can see it's physically painful for them to look at you. You can see their body tense up. They, start to squirm in their seat and they're looking above you, to the side of you, every way but in your eyes. And so, we put a lot of emphasis on eye contact, and it is important in certain circumstances. But I want to challenge you when you're working with someone with autism, maybe let's focus on, are they actually attending? Can we get them to orient? So like turn their body towards us. Are they understanding what we're saying? Those things are going to be more important to me than if someone makes eye contact. Sometimes we also teach individuals to overdo the eye contact, and staring at someone for a long amount of time is just as awkward as having poor eye contact. So it's really that fine line and fine balance. Also things like understanding gestures, body language, facial expression. That nonverbal component of language makes up a huge chunk of our communication with others. And so, being able to read someone's facial expressions. How do you know when someone doesn't want to engage in a conversation with you anymore? How do you know if someone's upset or if you said something that was offensive? Picking up on those nonverbal cues can be a challenge sometimes. Other differences we see are a hard time understanding social relationships. Jacqueline and I worked with an MU student who had a really hard time. He thought his TA was one of his friends, and he had a really hard time figuring out that relationship between what's a true peer, what's kind of a teacher-student role, maybe also what's a romantic role that you might have with someone. And so, teaching our individuals to distinguish these different types of peer and social relationships that they might have. Also, perspective taking. Jacqueline will talk more about this in a second and how we can support individuals, but the ability to understand that what I think isn't necessarily what someone else thinks. And also that just because, I didn't intend for my behavior to have a certain consequence doesn't mean that my behavior didn't have a consequence. And, that ability to really wrap your brain around the fact that what I think isn't universal can be really, really challenging. Understanding an individual's emotions of their self and others, being just socially aware of the things that they say, this idea of what we call the hidden curriculum, where there are things that you and I as neurotypical people take for granted that we just know to do, these social niceties, social expectations that sometimes our individuals don't do. I worked with a student who came into class one day and I had gotten my hair cut, and he was the student that, he always answered your questions, never asked you anything, wasn't really aware of his environment. And so I came in, I had my hair cut, and he came over and he said, hey, did you get your hair cut? And so I was thinking, we've made such progress. He's going to tell me my hair looks nice. I was all excited. And I said, yeah, I did. And he looked at me and he was like, okay. And he walked away. And, had I not known that he had autism, I might have been offended, right? Especially if I was a peer, I might have thought, man, he thinks my haircut's ugly, or, that was really rude, what a jerk. But for him, he really just wanted information. He saw something was different in his environment and he wanted to know. And then once he got that information, he was done with that conversation. And so that was a great teaching moment for him, that when you say, did you get your haircut? Or if you ask someone, is that a new outfit? There are certain responses that are expected in society. And when you don't say those things, the perception of you, someone's going to have a different perception. And although his intention wasn't to offend me, someone could be offended by his response. Also, using things like abstract language can be challenging. Humor, so making jokes, using sarcasm, being mindful of that. Some individuals are really great and they can pick up on that really easily. Others have a really hard time distinguishing if it's actually sarcasm and humor, or is someone being serious. Let's take a look at this clip. If you haven't seen the movie Adam, this is one of my favorite movies. And Adam is a young adult with autism. He's at his apartment. I'm sitting outside and there's a new neighbor moving in. And I want you to watch this and then see what you notice between Adam and his neighbor's conversation.
Hi, neighbor.
There are new images of Saturn from the Cassini project.
Oh, God. I always wish I knew more about space.
You did? Like what?
I don't know. What's out there.
You have to narrow that down.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Oh, well, I have books and telescopes, star charts. You can borrow some stuff. But we could go out and look at sky tonight.
Maybe, sometime, sure.
Okay.
Well, I'll just be hauling these enormous grocery bags upstairs now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I love this clip. Sometimes people will ask, like, is this exaggerated? Do people with autism really do this? And the answer is absolutely. Jacqueline and I see this all the time in the young adults that we work with. So some things that you might have noticed is right off the bat, Adam's sitting out there, you can tell his restricted interest is space. And his neighbor comes over and says, hey, neighbor. And the expectation of a social response to a greeting from a neighbor is, hey, how are you? Oh, are you new here? I haven't seen you around. Anything, right? But she said, hey, neighbor, and he launches right into his restricted interest. And if you saw her face, she was like, this is awkward. So then she comes over, she's talking to him. She's just trying to make small talk. And she said, yeah, I love learning about space. And he's like, well, what? Kind of puts her on the spot. Also, he said, maybe we could go look at the stars tonight. And she said, yeah, maybe sometime, sure. But because Adam is such a literal thinker, and he said, maybe we could go look at the stars tonight, and she ended the sentence with sure, he actually expects that they have a date that night and he's waiting for her, and she doesn't show up. Now, if I told Jacqueline, like, hey, maybe we should go grab lunch sometime, I'm not going to expect then at noon that day she's going to meet me at the Olive Garden, right? Because we haven't made any plans. We didn't set an actual time. We didn't have a conversation about it. But Adam, again, didn't know and didn't have that social understanding to recognize that. Also, at the very end, you can see that she's struggling with the groceries, and she said, well, I guess I'll just be hauling these enormous grocery bags up the stairs. Again, that's that social bid for then someone to say, oh my gosh, let me help you. Or, yeah, those look heavy, let me give you a hand, and then actually help her. But, Adam didn't pick up on that social bid. And because her communication wasn't super clear, he didn't understand that. Now, if she would have said, hey, can you help me with these groceries? He probably would have popped right up and helped her. But again, this really highlights the importance that our communication needs to be very clear and very specific of what we want or need from an individual. So other communication challenges that you might notice, someone might talk excessively about their own special interest. We definitely saw that with Adam. This idea of what we call perseveration, or like getting stuck on a topic where even if you try to change the topic, it's like they have to keep coming back to it. That decreased abstract language, those reciprocal conversation skills, all the things that we talked about earlier, really highlight again the importance of making sure that we are very clear with our communication so that the individuals know what to expect. Things like understanding and expressing emotions can also be really difficult. So, you know, we talked about the nonverbal body language, and that's hard sometimes to interpret, especially like facial expressions and body posture and things like that. But also, you know, how individuals label and identify their own emotions and other emotions. So recognizing when someone else is upset, why they're upset. A lot of times, you know, I've worked with students who think that they've done something wrong because someone's upset, but really it has absolutely nothing to do with them. Also identifying like when they're upset, what is an expected social response. Sometimes individuals will laugh in uncomfortable situations, or if someone's, you know, upset, they might not respond with the warmth that they should. And that, again, that's not them trying to be mean or, you know, malicious or anything like that. It's just those social responses can be really challenging for individuals to determine how they should respond. That also makes teaching those really hard, right? Because there's so many different various social situations. So to try to teach someone, okay, if someone is crying, this is how you respond. Well, there's not one response, right? So, you know, people could be crying for various reasons, and based on the context, you're going to change your reaction. So imagine if I have autism and that's difficult, learning all those nuances of my reaction to other people's behavior, that can be really difficult. So here's another clip I want you guys to watch. This is going to be from Big Bang and Sheldon and his ability to express his emotions naturally. So let's take a look at this.
And when we go in there, let's show Raj that we're happy for him.
But I'm not.
Well, then fake it. Look at me. I could be grinding on the fact that without my stabilizing telescope mount, he never would have found that stupid little clump of cosmic schmutz. But I'm bigger than that.
Fine. What do you want me to do?
Smile.
Oh, crap, that's terrifying.
We're here to see Kuthrapali, not kill Batman.
Try less teeth.
Close enough, come on. Hey, Raj.
Hey, guys, what's up?
We just wanted to invite you out to dinner tonight.
Let's celebrate your 30 under 30 thing. Right, Sheldon?
It's very nice of you. I would like that.
Hello, boys.
Dr. Gablehauser?
Dr. Kuthrapali. Dr. Gablehauser. Dr. Hofstadter.
Dr. Gablehauser.
Dr. Cooper.
Dr. Gablehauser.
Mr. Wolowitz.
All right, so I love this clip. Again, people, you know, this show's meant to be exaggerated and Sheldon's meant to be funny, but it can be like this for some individuals. Emotions do not come naturally, and sometimes we have to teach students and people we work with, like, this is the expected social response, this is how you can exhibit it. And even if it doesn't come naturally to you, like they said at the beginning, fake it until you make it. Like, here are expected behaviors in certain situations. And even if you are not sure how to act, let me kind of set you up for success and tell you, like, these are the expected behaviors, and that way our students know how to respond. So things like when you go into a large lecture classroom, these are typically expected behaviors. If there's, you know, a row of empty seats and there's you know, 2 people sitting in the row and 10 other empty chairs, you're not going to go sit right next to one of the individuals in those seats, right? Like, that's an unexpected behavior that makes people uncomfortable. So sometimes we have to teach certain behavior for certain situations that our students might come across on campus. Perspective taking, we talked a little bit about this, but again, that ability to recognize and understand that your thoughts, feelings, beliefs are not always shared by other people. And we use perspective taking to help us predict what other people are going to do, how they're going to respond, and then adjust our behavior to respond appropriately. And like I shared, when you don't have perspective taking, when you don't have that ability to take someone else's perspective, it can make you seem rude or insensitive or odd, or in the case of Adam, like a jerk, right? Like he couldn't be, bothered to help carry the groceries. And it can really lead to difficulties with developing peer relationships, to problem solving, and this is one of the biggest things. If we don't work on teaching this, it can really impact that college experience. Because if you think about all the different ways that you have to exhibit perspective taking as a college student or even as an employee on campus, it's a lot, and it's multiple times throughout the day. And so making sure that our individuals really grasp this concept, really get a chance to practice this, and then that we give feedback in situations where maybe there was some unexpected behavior, that's going to be really important. Okay, one more clip. This is one of my favorites from The Office. I want you to take a look at this, and then we'll discuss what we see.
It is crucial that you listen, Dwight. Also, you want to respect their... Are you listening now?
Yes.
Okay, well, you have to show us.
That's impossible. Listening happens in the ear and in the brain. I mean, some organisms have external hairs that vibrate to indicate auditory stimulation, but unfortunately, our external hairs don't vibrate at all.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
What are you doing?
A little smile and a nod shows that I hear you. Got it?
Kind of.
Nellie, why don't you tell Dwight what we were doing earlier today, and Dwight, you show us that you're listening.
Well, we were in the warehouse where we were discussing the mural that I've commissioned Pam to paint there. We were talking about the colour schemes and the major themes we want to hit. Children of the world coming together, cutting down trees to make paper, but not in a child laboury way.
It's just up and down. Just a regular nod, like a person.
I am a person.
Of
Yes.
course, you're a person.
Yeah.
We can do this, all right? And then we thought I can't carry on with that face. Look at it, I'm going to get nightmares with that face.
Oh, Dwight, he cracks me up. So again, an example of sometimes we have to teach these skills that might come naturally to typically developing people. And, these nonverbal cues, the ability to show people that we're listening and that we're paying attention. We talked about, eye contact. Too much is awkward, and too little can be awkward. The same with, responding to conversation, showing someone you're listening by like nodding your head and knowing when to inject and say, mm-hmm, or yeah, or great idea, or I understand. Jacqueline and I just spoke with a graduate student at MU this morning who, this was something that he struggled with, being able to have these conversational skills, and recognizing again that overdoing it can be just as awkward as underdoing it. So thinking about ways that we can look at some of these deficits or differences and turn them into strengths. So a lot of times, especially in the medical community or in the educational community, we focus on the things that people can't do as part of their disability. And sometimes we have to, because that's how you get a diagnosis, or at schools, that's how you get services, that's how you access resources at the disability center. So, it's important to recognize those differences, but also how can those differences be turned into strengths? One thing too that you might have noticed is during this presentation today, I've been referring to individuals with autism instead of saying autistic. And so there's a little bit of a debate right now in the autism community in terms of what people with autism themselves want to refer to themselves as. So for a long time, we've used what's called person first language, where we say a person with autism because they are a person first, and autism just happens to be part of who they are. But there's a lot of individuals with autism who refer to themselves as autistic because they see their autism as being a huge part of who they are, and they're very proud of that, as they should be. So what we have chosen to do as professionals or as neurotypical people is we will continue to say an individual with autism. And then as people tell us, hey, you can say that you can call me autistic, you can refer to something as autistic, we will of course change our language just like we would working with anybody. We will address them however they prefer to be addressed. But that's just something to be mindful of in a discussion that you might hear as we continue to go down this path of really giving people with autism a voice and making sure that they're advocating for themselves. And that fits nicely into this idea of looking at, strengths. So a difference in autism is maybe somebody really has an insistence on sameness. They love having things the same in a routine. The young man that Jacqueline and I met with earlier today, we really loved what he said. He said, I have strengths and things that I'm good at. And then he called them side effects instead of like deficits or differences. So for a strength for someone might be that they're really consistent. They love sameness. They're able to, do the same thing or have things in the same order. That can really be a strength, especially in school, on the employment site. But a side effect or a deficit of that or a difference could be sometimes insistent on sameness can be really distracting. It can cause you to become, to perseverate on that insistent on sameness and to the point where you're, maybe excluding other things or missing deadlines for class, maybe focusing too much on that sameness instead of looking at the details that you should be looking at. Another difference is that some of our individuals are really obsessed with those interests. So Sheldon, science, Adam, space, and again, thinking things like the good doctor. If my restricted interest can be turned into a career or a major or a hobby that I could be really good at, that's going to be really beneficial. I want a doctor whose restricted interest is medicine. I want someone working at NASA whose their restricted interest is going to be space. We can use those to really highlight and be a benefit in someone's life. Those ritualized patterns of behavior, we could see that as someone is really predictable. If someone likes to, do something over and over in the same manner, maybe they always like to have a certain seat in class, or they, always have to, do these steps before completing an assignment or before, engaging in a social activity. That can be really helpful for other people to know what to expect from them. And it can help us kind of tailor and modify our environment so that they can be successful. And then those lack of understanding or social cues, that could be seen as people are really honest and they take things at face value. The young man who, asked me about my haircut, I know that if I want an honest opinion, I can go and ask him and he will give it to me. He's not going to say something to make me feel better or lie to spare my feelings. If I want true feedback, I'm going to go to him. And that can be a huge strength in a lot of different areas. So now looking at unique skills and insights, a lot of our individuals are really assets to professors, but also if you think about, the goal of coming to college is to get a degree and to graduate and to get employment. And, all of the things that we've talked about, the deficits and the strengths and, the social communication skills and the restrictive repetitive behaviors and things like that, all of those can be really used to highlight an individual's unique skills. So things like attention to detail, dependability, loyal, logical, ability to think outside of the box. That's why some individuals are really great in creative fields because they think in a way that neurotypical people might not necessarily think. The ability to be imaginative. They're diverse. Don't we want a diverse community at MU? It would be pretty boring if we were all exactly the same. And so thinking about how we can make this campus even more diverse, both on the student side, but also the people that we hire. They can be, really likable. They're funny. Sometimes there's this myth that individuals with autism don't like social interaction or don't want social relationships. And while that's true for some individuals, a lot of them, want those relationships. They want those friendships and they love interacting with other people and they're just cool people to hang out and be around. So now Jacqueline's going to talk here in a second about individuals and why it's important to think about how we can support individuals in college.
All right. So we look at autism in transition, and we know, like Courtney pointed out, that there are several benefits of having individuals with autism being on our college campus and being a part of our community. But a lot of times we're seeing that many of our individuals are underemployed or unemployed. And so we have to be really mindful about why is that happening and create an environment on Mizzou's campus that allows our students that do make it into the university that they stay enrolled and that they're able to finish college. Because we know that students with autism want to go to college for the exact same reasons as we all do, right? They want to gain independence. They want to graduate, have a career, and maybe it's their restricted interest, something they just know that they're good at, or they know that they can have a successful life. Like Courtney mentioned, many of our individuals with autism want to meet new people and have new experiences, and going to college and developing careers give people that opportunity. When we think about those, what we call, sometimes people refer to a high functioning autism spectrum disorder. And it's just really important that we remember that all individuals on the autism spectrum need support as they're transitioning from high school to their next step. So although our individuals with autism may have above average IQ and really excellent in the academic areas, they may really struggle with college. High school and college are really different. We see a lot of people have a hard time with that transition period. And sometimes with our individuals with autism, that transition is even harder. They may struggle with what are quoted as like soft skills or those social skills. We know that academics aren't the only thing that students are doing on campus. They're involved in social opportunities. Classes have those social opportunities, those group discussions. All those pieces add up to creating a successful college career. Like Courtney mentioned, that really our individuals with autism bring that unique strengths and needs to a college campus. So we want to make sure that we're supporting those individuals, because it would be boring and we wouldn't be getting so many of those great benefits of our individuals with autism if we don't include them in that college campus setting. So Courtney went through an overview of what autism is and even started alluding to some of the pieces that we can use to support the student within the classroom. Most of the accommodations and tools that I'm going to talk about over the next few minutes are really focused on the classroom, but you can see how you can use these types of tools and accommodations in a variety of different situations. So I think it's really important when you think about accommodations that many of our individuals with autism don't disclose to the disability office. So if they do, that's amazing. That allows you people that work with the student, professors, to know that the student has accommodations, you know that there's a disability that they are disclosing, and it makes it really clear. But that's not always the case. There's several reasons why individuals don't always disclose and go to the disabilities office. So it's important to think about these accommodations that you can use for all students, or if you notice a student is struggling, even if they're not officially enrolled with the disability office, think about how you can set up the classroom or set up the way you're working with the student to hopefully really maximize their benefit. So think about priority seating. If they're sitting closer to where the lecture is taking place, or they're sitting closer to the person that requires the most attention, there's less distractions. Or consider recording different lectures so they can go back and listen to things, or make sure that maybe they have a note taker, or you're making sure that as you're meeting with the student or as the students in class, that notes are being taken so they have access to that later. Making sure that you provide access to presentations or instructor notes. We all know that even, for example, in this situation right now, you're going through, there's a lot of slides and you aren't going to write down every single thing. That's why we'll provide handouts at the end of the session so that you're able to go back and have that information to refer to later. We know that we all use that as a tool, and so making sure that's used for students as well. If the student is enrolled with the Disability Center, you might see that they have extended time on exams, or they're allowed to take that exam in a different environment, which typically is because it has those reduced distractions. You may see use of computer, or encourage people to bring computers to class. Then they're not having to worry about that motor skill of writing as much. And you may see students that need assistance with group work, and we'll talk about some of those pieces in a minute. So really, when you're thinking about tools for interaction, you really want to make sure that you're building rapport and establishing that trust to decrease conflict. You want to make sure that you're setting boundaries. As Courtney mentioned earlier about the student who the GA was being really nice and helpful, and he mistook that helpfulness as flirting or taking that relationship in more of a personal direction opposed to what's expected with a GA and a student. So setting those boundaries up front can be really helpful. What's that expectation of the relationship, and when are office hours? When do you expect to be emailed? If you do give students your phone number, when do you expect to receive text messages or calls? Do you have time frame that you expect those to happen in, and it would be unexpected if they texted outside of work hours, maybe from 8 to 5. So thinking about setting up those boundaries from the beginning can be really helpful. And when you're making these suggestions, make sure that you're being direct. Like Courtney mentioned earlier, it's just easier if you avoid those metaphors, idioms, sarcasm. All those pieces can really convolute your message. If you can, provide written instructions, so you're giving that verbal information, and try to provide those written instructions as well so they can refer to that information later. Helping the students adjust to college culture. It's hard, that transition from high school life where you're many times in a bubble, you're getting a lot of support from teachers and parents, to a much more independent life on a college campus. So start talking about that expectations are different, and talking about why those expectations are different, related to the job world. Talking about why things are the way they are can be really helpful in helping the individual adjust. Also, in the syllabus or when you're sitting down with students, help them prioritize their assignments or what they need to do at home on a day. Whatever your role may be when you're talking with students, make sure that they're starting to internally prioritize things. We're worked with a student who just came in and said that he was so stressed out about a big project coming up, and even though he knew he should set those deadlines and be working on it week to week, he was so overwhelmed by the idea that he just didn't do the assignment and ended up turning in the assignment 6 weeks late. And unfortunately, 6 weeks late is a huge problem, because many times you needed to get feedback on that assignment in order to move forward successfully in the class. So when there are bigger assignments, talking about those benchmarks, creating maybe mini deadlines within can be really helpful to ensure that students are staying on top of that activity. And try not to take that seemingly rude behavior personally, like the haircut comment. Try to know that many times it's just that theory of mind or perspective taking difference that is maybe providing some of that behavior differences. Some other tools are just making sure that you're providing a specific schedule. And if you know that there's going to be a change in the schedule, provide as much advance notice for that as possible. As we know, transitions or changes in schedule can be difficult for some of our individuals. Always want to acknowledge acceptable classroom behaviors and even reinforce those. Try to give feedback either in the moment or later. If the student comes to office hours, talk about what's going well. Many times we're talking about what's going wrong, and highlighting what's going well can be really helpful. Also allows students to communicate through multiple modes. So think about what's easiest for that student, and then try to provide opportunities for that as much as possible. So maybe email is really helpful for the student, because they're able to pause, collect their thoughts, really think step by step what they want to share with you. Or maybe they want to do it face to face, because they really need all that input so that they can put it all together. We had one individual who was applying for jobs, and he was just dying to take his resume into each location and hand them a printed copy. And so we really had to talk to him about, like, although that's your preference, that's not working for businesses, because they don't expect you to show up. So talking through those reasonings why you're setting up a certain kind of communication, if that is the case. Making sure that you're giving feedback, and I'll explore that a little bit more on a later slide. But think about and also allowing time for verbal responses. So if you can have slides up with the question, so they can be reading the question and kind of planning ahead, or saying, Courtney, I'm gonna get this question from Billy, and then I'm gonna come to you next. So just kind of these cues that you're allowing them some thinking time. We use how can you problem solve a lot when we're working with young adults. We had one young adult who would ask us what time it was when his iPad was in his hand. And it was just because it was a habit. He got in the habit during high school and at home that he knew that if he just asked a question, someone kind of would come in and rescue him out of that situation. And so it is a lot easier for me just to say, oh, it's 3:40 and move on. But that's really not reminding him that he can solve that problem on his own. So asking him how he can problem solve, he looks down at the iPad and we move on. It can take longer at first, but in the end, the student's going to realize that they can use their own resources and depend on themselves for that answer. So, if you know that the information's in the syllabus, say, hey, can you take a look at the syllabus first? And if you still have a question, I'd love to address that with you, so that you're really encouraging them to build that independence up, because you want to make sure that they're able to be successful both in your class and in the future. When you are experiencing an unexpected behavior in class, make sure that you're kind of prepared for this. So thinking about that, you really want to sort through the details to understand the student's perspective. You want to make sure that the student feels heard, even if it's an unexpected behavior. So like we had the student that has the unexpected reaction that he thinks that the GA is flirting and he's starting to develop that crush. So understand the perspective, understand like, okay, she was being nice. You can acknowledge that that's happened, but there are consequences for responding in a more personal way when you're expected a professional circumstance. You want to assume that the student did the best they could with the information that they have, and search for that missing information and talk about those hidden rules that maybe weren't explicitly explored with the student, and talk about what was different there and why that difference was so unexpected. And then just making sure that you're being consistent and specific with that information. So here's some example about providing feedback. Like I mentioned, sometimes we can really rely on negative feedback, really talking about what's going wrong, but just being sure that you're also talking about what's being right, going well. So we like to say, like, be direct, but be kind. If you notice a student is smelly in class, or you notice they're, showing up really disheveled and it's causing, rifts between peers, talking to them about that can be really helpful. But it is difficult. The example here is kind of funny. It's, I like your hat, your face is ugly, but your top is nice. So you never want to be that brutally, with your feedback, but you see that there's like a compliment at the top, you have that corrective feedback, but you're finishing up with another compliment of what's going well. You want to make sure that it still is all true information, and that you're really making sure that the student is walking away understanding what's expected for next time. And that's really because the students, like Courtney mentioned, perspective taking can be really hard. And we also talk about a theory, supporting theory of mind. So supporting theory of mind is really that ability to understand that other people have different beliefs, desires, and perspectives from their own. And so really making sure that the student understands that why your perspective is different from theirs. And just because someone else's perspective is different, it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Sometimes things are just different. What we talk to our young adults a lot about is how they might have the best intentions, but if people are perceiving them in an unexpected way, it doesn't really matter what your intentions were. It still had a negative outcome, and really talking through that with them. So for example, if a student is, showing up late, 15 minutes late to class on a regular basis, people around that student are going to start thinking they just don't care about this class. They don't care about their education. But the reality could be is that the student just has a really hard time hearing their alarm in the morning, and they're just having a hard time getting out of bed. So even though, it's not an intentional blowing off of class or showing up late, it still means that the perspectives are that the student doesn't care about class. So working through, like, talking about why they're late, and then encouraging the student to problem solve. So if you've noticed a pattern and the student knows that they're sleeping through their alarm, they can't just keep going on that same path. They need to make a change. And so, setting multiple alarms, or setting an alarm and moving the phone farther away so that they have to physically get out of bed to turn it off, or something like that can be helpful. When you think about common barriers during class, we think about, like, group work can be difficult, group class discussions can be hard, and when distractions come up in class, that can be difficult. So when we think about group work, challenges may include that students are struggling with developing like that group rapport. They're having a hard time getting to know the team, or they may be really or rigid or inflexible about their expectations of the tasks and how they're going to divvy out the responsibilities. They may have a hard time seeing the point of view of others. They may have that hard time picking up on those hidden rules. So, where to sit, how to kind of address people. Maybe the group wants to spend some time with small talk and chit chat, getting to know each other, but instead the student just wants to get right down to business. And so that can be really helpful in getting the group to work, but it may be difficult in, gelling with that group. So ways that you can think about supporting group work are just really assigning group members and roles from the start, making sure that the expectations are really specific, and you may even think about those social and academic sides of those expectations. Consider monitoring group interactions and mediate as necessary, and then also consider offering an alternative approach. So what are the objectives of the activity? Is it that they're working with other people? Does it mean it has to be a big group? Could they work with just one other person? How can they meet the same objectives, but maybe not have that strenuous group work activity? You can also see that there may be challenges with class discussions. So maybe a student is monopolizing the conversation, or they really have that intense narrow interest. So they started out on topic and they got so intense down the rabbit hole that now they're no longer hitting the objectives of that discussion. Or maybe they're just not picking up on some of those social cues. So everyone's paused, they're looking at the student, and the student is just unaware that it's their turn to respond. So setting up those clear boundaries and expectations, again, is really helpful. Provide direct feedback, like how are things going? Maybe after class, you pull the student aside for a quick minute and talk about what went well and what could have used improvement. And also, if it's a smaller group, think about priming other students in class to prompt as needed. Another piece here is thinking about distractions come up. Students can be hypersensitive. They can have a hard time understanding those rules of a social interaction. They might be really overwhelmed, or there might be a change in routine that causes issues within class. So think about supporting that with can you provide a short break to provide a little bit of time to de-escalate, or, providing that direct feedback again, setting those clear boundaries of what those expectations are. Also, you can ensure you are providing access to requested accommodations. So always think back, what's the plan? How do I best support the student? And am I meeting all of those pieces in this moment? And if it is a change in routine that's throwing the student off, how can you plan ahead for next time so that they don't experience that same jolt of, I don't know what's going on. So those are all things that you can do with students that you're working with. If you notice that there's still a barrier, they're still having some challenges, at Mizzou there is the STRIVE program which Courtney and I are a part of. So it's a program for young adults with autism, and other similar disabilities. So it can be a great program that helps individuals that are already in college, that are preparing to go to college, so that they really have those skills that will allow them to sustain their college career and then find employment afterwards. We often find that our individuals that we work with have an idea of what they want to do. They're pursuing their degree, but when push comes to shove and they actually do the job shadow, it's not something they're actually interested in, or it's more overwhelming than they anticipated. So going through some job shadowing and things like that can be really helpful for students to ensure that they're on the right path through college. So STRIVE stands for the Self-Determined Transition Readiness Through Individual Vocational Experiences. And when we think about STRIVE was really developed out of the need for more resources dedicated to supporting individuals with autism spectrum disorder. And so we really wanted to make sure that they had the training and the skills to lead those fulfilling lives. So not just checking the boxes, but they're truly living their good life and what they want to see for themselves. STRIVE is a 2-semester program. It starts in August and ends in May. It follows the typical Mizzou calendar. Students meet on campus for direct instruction, and I'll talk a little bit more about what STRIVE actually looks like. Sorry, my computer froze for a second. So there's the direct instruction. We have peer mentoring and employment experiences. So when we think about the direct instruction, that's really going to be that classroom-based information. So we do a lot of different ways of learning. So there's didactic information, there's modeling. We have students watch videos, we have them videotape themselves and then rate those interactions. We have practice activities, we have individuals doing things on their own, like career exploration. And then we also have them working with the group on group activities so that they're getting that practice and that feedback in kind of a natural and supported setting. We really focus on the learning for, career exploration, making sure that students know what careers are out there. And if they're interested in a certain area, how can they use those interests and strengths that they have to really build on that career? We also talk about goal setting, and that can be really hard. So what are their short-term goals and what are their long-term goals, and how, as a program within Strive, can we support them in meeting those goals? We talk about where they want to live, who they want to live with, what they want to do for their career. Do they envision themselves married? Do they want kids? All of those pieces that make a whole life, we really try to explore with goal setting. We work on social skills. We work on employment skills. So, what does their resume look like? How are their interview skills? And we really break all of those pieces down. So when they're leaving Strive, they have a good handle on all of those employment pieces. We also talk about problem solving a lot because we know that much of college and much of our careers are that problem solving piece. So we really talk about what is efficient problem solving, how can they do that as independently as possible. And then the last piece that's there is that self-monitoring piece. So it's great that I can tell a student that they're doing well, but at the end of the day, we really want them to know that they're doing well, or that they did something unexpected and they need to change their behavior slightly. So we really work a lot on having them start self-reflecting and regulating their own behaviors so that they're able to be successful, not only in the Strive classroom, but across different contexts in their community and different classes. We average about 206 hours throughout the program. So direct instruction is much heavier in the first semester, and there's less direct instruction in the second semester as they get job experience. Another part of Strive, another pillar of the program, is that peer mentoring piece. So we do have MU students are paired up with the Strive participants. The role of the mentor is really to help with goal setting and action planning. We tell the students that their time with their peer mentors is really that time to make great progress on their goals. We've had students, do a ton of job searching. We've had students fill out college applications. We've had a couple students learn how to drive with their peer mentors. So we've really seen great growth for students as they're working with their peer mentors. And they can really help with that change of transition. So, leaving that more comforting place with high school, and as they take a more independent approach. So those are pretty semi-structured. We do provide advice and ideas for individuals to do with their peer mentor, but it's not something that they have to do. It's really, we want it to be driven by their goals. They average about 59 total hours throughout the program. The third pillar is really that job shadow piece, or sorry, that employment experience piece. And so job shadowing is what they do for the first semester. So we have a variety of job sites. Many of them are within the Mizzou system. I know that we have some people from different divisions and backgrounds here. So if you have any ideas of student positions that would be a good fit to pair with Strive, we would love to hear that. Our emails are at the end of the slides. So we're always looking to find new partners and expand our job shadowing sites. So some examples are athletics, food services, healthcare, accounting department. We hope that we have something that really interests each of our participants, but also it gives them a variety of an idea of what's out there. And you can see that there are different types of jobs. Some are very busy, some are sitting at a computer, some are around a lot of people, some are more individualistic. So thinking about, then they walk away and they can really determine what they liked about each of those positions. They average about 43 hours of that job shadowing during that, and they rotate around to a different variety of jobs. Based on what they liked and what the employers thought of each student, the employers will interview our Strive participants, and they will then work at their their paired job site for 15 to 25 hours per week, and they are paid for that employment. And it's an awesome time for some of our students. It's the first time that they're earning that paycheck, and it's a really great growth opportunity. We've also seen that our employers are really satisfied with the employees that they get out of the Strive program, and many of our participants stay in those positions past when Strive graduation ends. We don't just anecdotally look and think, okay, our students are doing better from where they started at the beginning of the program. We do lots of pre and post testing to ensure that our instruction is, evidence-based, and that we're doing right by our participants. So really those preliminary results indicate that we're seeing that students have improved self-determination. They know that they're in control of their life. They have increased job-related skills. They've reduced their levels of anxiety. They've reduced demonstrated autism symptomology, and they're really reporting that they were satisfied with the program. You can see here that each, and you guys will have access to these slides, so I won't break down these graphs in great detail, but just so you can kind of see the by numbers. So you can see the blue is where they started and the green is where they are now. And so we're really seeing growth over several of those areas there. We're also seeing here that you really want to see inhibition and emotional control. All of those things are improving. And in this specific scale, you do want to see that those numbers are going down. And so you can see that the post is a lower level. So that means they are doing better with those executive functioning pieces. They're planning better. They're using that working memory. They're controlling their emotions better. You can also see that anxiety has gone down from the pre-test to the post-test. The great piece about this that I kind of alluded to is that our participants aren't the only people that are positively impacted by the program. Our employers get great employees out of this program, and they have awesome things to say about the Strive participants. You can see that 100% of our individuals that have gone through Strive, and we continue to follow up with them after their graduation date, graduation from Strive, and 100% are employed, and we continue to urge them to expand on their employment, that they don't have to stay in that same job forever, but are they moving up? Are they getting more hours? Are they doing something that they really like? And so it's exciting to see that their goals change and grow over time. Here's some more examples of the employer feedback, just that our individuals have been an asset and they were delightful to work with. You can also see that participants had great feedback about the program, and that's really so important to us, is that we really want students to walk away with that confidence and the ability to use their skills in a really honed way. So here are some resources here. And that can really help you continue to support students as you're working with individuals. I have our email addresses here. So if you have any questions about the Strive program or anything that we've talked about today, we are always happy to answer those questions. There is the website at the bottom if there is a little bit of a video clip and more information about the Strive program, and also the application if you think any of your students would be interested. I do see one question in the chat about if students have to be enrolled in MU, and no, you do not have to be enrolled in MU. Although it is hosted on MU's campus, it is not only for students. So we have some students that are very interested in the college path, and other students that are really interested in jumping right into their career and getting into their job field. So we really balance that based on the students' goals. We really thank you guys for spending this hour with us, and we're happy to answer some more questions if you have any.
Thank you so much for sharing with us this afternoon and your expertise.